Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, 321 Blast Off, How to Give Your New Programs the Launch They Deserve. Now I'd like to introduce you to Jack Klett from Capture Higher Ed to get this thing going.
Thank you so much, Alicia, and hello, everybody. Welcome to another action-packed webinar from Capture Higher Ed. I'm joined by my close friend and colleague, Jamie Gleason. Jamie, hello.
Hello there.
Jamie, we come together today to talk about a very important topic, which I think is appropriate because when you and I were talking about what we were going to, talking about the preparation of this webinar, we both acknowledge that we have quite a number of partners who are launching new programs at both the undergraduate level, the graduate level, professional credentials, certificate options this coming fall. But we also know that from our own experience in dealing with program launches and the marketing and recruitment of them, that this is the time where a lot of that planning starts for those programs that will be launched come late summer, fall 2020. So anyway, it makes sense that we're talking about this today. Everyone out there, thank you for joining us. Those of you who join us regularly know that I am Jack Klett, Director of Graduate and Online Initiatives. Jamie, you want to introduce yourself?
I sure will. My name is Jamie Gleason, coming to you live from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and I am one of a team of senior account executives at Capture Higher Ed. I'm in the account management end. With a number of years in higher ed, I'm excited to be a part of this conversation because we've seen program launches that go poorly, and hopefully what we can do is help to guide that process for those of you who are listening in.
Agreed. I have to say that in my time in higher ed, sitting in the institution side, I have been involved with many a successful launch. But I have also been involved with some that have gone poorly. So we'll put those in the pitfalls to avoid
right.
Portion of this presentation. So we have two wonderful guests with us today who will introduce themselves more robustly once they join the conversation. Lloyd Russo, former Associate Provost and Dean of Graduate Studies at Philadelphia University, Thomas Jefferson University. Lloyd has worn many hats at that institution and is also a former colleague of mine as I was at Philadelphia University for 11 years. And also our good friend John Witherington, Director of Admissions, both undergrad and grad at Thomas Jefferson University as well. Jamie, I think it would be important for us before we dive into the conversation here to just kind of set the stage a little bit. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this might be particularly critical as we think about the setting we're in the academic atmosphere, post-May 1 even. I know a lot of people are probably thinking about the launch pad and what are the things I've got to do over the summer and even into the next cycle. So let's start off that way.
All right, so for setting the stage, in keeping with our theme here, because I said it was action-packed, we have spaceships and all.
Action-packed, baby.
Action-packed. So we are going to set the launch pad. So these are some of the trends that we're seeing in academic program development. It's really fascinating to think that since 2012, there have been 41,446 new degree or certificate programs added to the academic landscape in higher education. That is a significant number. And if we take a look at kind of just the overall growth in degree completions or degree conferrals across our various populations, we see significant growth here as well. So since 2001, there has been a 74% increase in the number of associate degrees that are conferred annually. Bachelor degree, we've also seen growth in conferrals, an increase of 57% there annually. Master's degrees, significant growth, a 70% increase. And even at the doctoral level, we're seeing significant growth, 52% increase in conferred doctoral degrees annually. So there are a lot more program options, and there are a lot more folks who are taking advantage of those options and ultimately completing those programs and leaving with conferred degrees. Something that is a bit more of a trend kind of on the front end here has been the 71% increase in professional credentials or certificates completed since 2001. And that's significant because what we're seeing is both at the undergraduate level, the graduate level, this idea of professional credentialing, both as a bit of an insurgent competitor to established higher education, but also partnering with established higher education programs so that these programs can either lead to certificates or for credit credentialing. So a lot going on in terms of the growth and folks taking advantage of that growth. If you look at it just purely by the numbers, this is what we're looking at. So here you see since 2001, the growth from associates all the way through to the doctoral level. And just what we're talking about when we talk about these percentage increases, because of the sheer volume of individuals who are receiving these degrees, we're talking about a significant number of degrees being conferred and increasing over time. All right, well, I think that does a good job of kind of setting the stage of where we are and what's happening in terms of the overall academic program development trends. Something that I do want to mention a little bit here is people often ask, well, why are all these programs being added? And programs being added for a number of reasons. A big reason has to do with net tuition revenue. As we all know, as we all have experienced, we have witnessed a decline in the number of traditional aged undergraduate students that are enrolling in institutions, purely as a mechanism by the fact that there's just a smaller number. So we see programs being added, particularly at the graduate level, but also at the certificate level, to deal with, to create basically an additional revenue stream. And certainly you see the leveraging of the online delivery platform for folks who have some college credits looking to accelerate that degree completion. That's also providing a nice net tuition revenue, alternative revenue stream. And that's important because not only do we have this decline in traditional, but we're also dealing with this kind of amenities Cold War as institution by institution by institution competes with one another to provide themselves with the best dining hall or the best athletic facility or the best residence halls. And that, of course, has led to a significant increase in expenditures on the part of institutions. So, so program growth is seen as one of the solutions to providing and capitalizing on additional enrollments and therefore additional revenue. All right, I think it is time for us to ask the practitioners, our professionals.
This is the segment of our show where we actually talk to other people.
That's right. That's right, where I shut my mouth, which is, as my friends know, is hard for me to do at times. So, yeah. So that said, I am gonna shut my mouth, but that's only because I'm going to be interviewing Lloyd and asking Lloyd some questions here. So let's go ahead and get started. Lloyd, I want to welcome you to this capture presentation. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, Jack, thank you very much for inviting me too. It's a pleasure talking to you again. As you said before, we worked together for a number of years, and it was a real pleasure. So it's good to be back. Sorry. Go ahead.
It was fun. We had a good amount of time. So that said, I want to just give you an opportunity to, rather than me kind of butcher your resume or butcher your titles, I want to give you the opportunity to share with everyone who you are, your background, and your experience in higher ed.
Okay. So it's important to understand that I'm both a professor of international business and marketing at Jefferson University and have been a professor for about 20 years. but I've also served as Jack mentioned before, in a number of capacities in administration, including graduate dean and associate provost. Most recently, I've been focusing on new academic programs, and that's been for the last 10 or 11 years. But I focus primarily on the initial stages of the process, assessing opportunities, developing proposals, and designing pro forma budgets for pre-launch. So that's a little bit about my background.
I know because we did work together for a long period of time, and you and I were involved in quite a number of new programs being launched, both kind of from the marketing perspective, but also from the market research perspective. Just so folks kind of know where you're coming from and your background and why I kind of consider you to be an expert when it comes to new program development. Can you give us an idea as to how many new academic offerings you've been involved with, either directly or as a contributor?
Actually, no. So since you're kidding around a little bit, I figured I could do that too. But just recently, and that's in the last 18 months, I've worked on over 40 programs, and we're not launching all of those this year or next, but these are programs that I'd say we're thinking about launching within a 3-year period. And that includes graduate, undergraduate, and either post-baccalaureate or postgraduate certificates. So it's a broad range of things.
Lloyd, this is kind of an ad hoc here that I'm asking you a little bit on the spot, because when you and I were talking a little bit in preparation of this webinar, I had mentioned to you the 41,500 new academic offerings that have been added since 2012, and you did not seem at all surprised by that. And I think it makes sense since you yourself are working on these 40 proposals for just one institution. I guess my question for you is, when you're going through this process of putting together these proposals or making or deciding, okay, well, we're looking at adding 40 new potential academic offerings over the course of the next 3 to 5 years, are you looking at existing programs at all to determine what, if anything, should be sunset or revised?
Yeah, so I mean, that's part of the process too, that I think people don't think about when they're designing new programs, is what happens if it fails? And you just mentioned sunsetting, and that's a term that I think I want to say that you and I devised when we were working at Philadelphia University. We don't like to talk about closing programs because that tends to scare people. Sunsetting is a little bit kinder, but you're right about it too. I mean, you mentioned before too, is there are programs that fail, and I can name a number as well. And you really do have to think about this. And when you're talking about 40 new programs, we can't launch all of those. So there is an approval process. We look at things like, how does it fit into the resources we have, and what's the return on investment? How quickly do we recoup our investment? Those sorts of things. But then also we ask the question, okay, so what if you're wrong and you don't get 50 students? What if you get 2? What are you going to do about that? And we have to ask the people who are designing the programs that question.
Well, I think, and you're starting to get to in the process here, which actually informs my next question.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
No, I think it's organic. So can you share a bit with the audience then your process for developing a new program? I mean, every institution I think kind of has their onboarding process or their process to do this. But I think universally there are some kind of key steps. So can you share with the audience your process for developing a new program?
Sure, I'd be happy to. And I'd like to mention something too, and I was thinking about this before too, is, a lot of places, and Philadelphia University Jefferson too, I'm sure, started programs through serendipity. So it was either, the dean's interest in a particular topic, or we hired a new faculty member that said, oh, I'm really keen on this particular area and I'd really like to have a program about this. And that to me is serendipity. We take a much different approach now. It's more, and again, I think of things in a business and a marketing perspective because that's where I come from. But I like to think of a SWOT analysis. So what opportunities are there right now? And you talk to anybody, and it's healthcare, or people are talking about analytics and data visualization as hot areas. So those might be opportunities, but how do they fit with your expertise in your particular institution? Do you need to acquire some resources that will help you take advantage of those resources? So it's a much more purposeful way when we're talking about assessing opportunities. So I mean, I'd start there. Is how do you when you're talking about ideation, is how do you come up with ideas? Again, lots of different sources for that. It could come from students, it could come from faculty, it could come from administrators. I mean, we get ideas from our provost, and it's a top-down sort of thing. Would you mind, as an expert in this particular field, would you assess that for us? So we'll start with that, and then we'll perform some initial research, and we look at a couple of different areas. One is, what's the competition? And very often we can do that and say, okay, there are other people who are offering, I don't know, athletic training programs or nutrition programs or whatever the particular area is. But as I like to say too, and I think I'm jumping ahead here a little bit, that there are two areas of assessing viability. One is, what's the demand for the offering? And the other one has to do with, what's the demand for the graduates that come out of the program? And I always tell people that that is as important, if not more important, than just assessing who else offers the program, because it determines the future viability of the program. If there's no demand for graduates, nobody's going to come into the program.
That's exactly right.
So you need to find out, what are the job opportunities for the graduates? And if you're not there, and it doesn't look like it's going to be a viable future for these graduates, my advice is, don't go there.
So I know you and I have talked about. Well, first, I think this is key, right? So if there are folks, there are institutions out there that they do pretty much none of this in-house in terms of assessing viability. They'll hire an external market research firm that will come in, and they will kind of kick the tires on all of this. But then there are others that either don't have the resources to hire an external market research partner, or would rather just take those dollars and put it toward either the delivery of the program, maybe equipment or faculty salaries, whatever it might be, or the marketing and recruitment plan. So if you are going to do this internally, you're saying that make sure that you are looking at not only the interest on the part of prospective students in the offering, but also what the interest is in terms of students who are going to graduate with the skills and the outcomes that this particular new academic program offering is providing. Correct?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
And there's actually a third alternative too, and that is sort of what we're doing at Jefferson right now, is where I'm the person that does the internal assessment, and I use some of the resources that you have up right now. But then we'll also ask for, and at times it depends what the program is, we'll ask for external validation. And that, again, the sorts of things that I'm going to talk about in terms of the tools that you can use for assessment are good for existing, and I call them products, but I guess programs would be products, programs or certificates would be more appropriate. But if we're talking about things like I said before, nutrition or athletic training, that's relatively easy to find information about in terms of completion rates, or job opportunities and those sorts of things. But I've also worked with programs like integrative medicine. I didn't even know what that was. Or digital health, topics that are so broad that it's almost impossible to define what the potential is, or where the jobs are going to be, because they're jobs that don't even exist today. So using an external external assessment or a consulting firm to help you with those sorts of things can be valuable, but they're expensive.
Yeah, indeed. So if you are going to kind of bypass that or do what you're saying, which I think basically, you know, what you've developed is a really nice way to kind of kick the tires on these ideas, these potential new programs. And then if you're indeed beginning to see some viability, then kind of going that next step to pursue that external validation, you know, that makes complete sense for those folks who are either going to do all of this in-house or who are going to kind of take your approach of kicking the tires with the upfront research. We've provided here a number of your recommendations on the types of tools that exist for folks to assess viability. Do you just want to run through some of these real quickly and give folks an idea of what these can do?
So again, my background is marketing and international marketing, and specifically what I did and my research focused on was identifying new markets for people who wanted to go international. So I don't know if you see the relationship there, but it's the same sort of thing here is if we're trying to find markets for new products, new programs, where do you go for the data? And I try to focus on things that are reliable and easily accessible and cheap. And that's the case with this list here too, is they're government resources and they're free and they tend to be very comprehensive, so you can get an awful lot of information out of this. So for instance, the NCES, the National Center for Education Statistics, is from the US Department of Education, and they base the data on information they collect from almost every institution in the United States. And it's an annual updated information resource. And as I said, you can get a lot of information on completion rates, for example. So if you want to find out who's competing in a particular area, again, athletic training, you can find out who has programs at, say, the bachelor's level for athletic training. And one of the things, and Jack, remind me if I'm not wrong too, is I provided an Excel spreadsheet for athletic training that I pulled from the NCS just the other day. So people can actually look at this information when you make it available later.
Yeah, we're going to, we're just to that point. You, I think, went above and beyond in terms of providing some takeaways for today. So we've actually taken a full example, which you've pretty much screenshot, and we're putting that into a PDF document that will be available for everyone who is joining us today.
So just to summarize, the sorts of things you can get out of this is, I noticed a 40% growth rate over a 5-year period in conferrals for athletic training. I can identify the 66 institutions that offer master's degrees in athletic training from the NCES data, and it's for 5 years. And again, Capture is going to make that available later. It's very valuable information because I can even tell you approximately how large the programs are at these different institutions. So again, from that perspective, it's pretty helpful. It tells me that it is a good area to get into. The growth rates indicate that this is a viable program to launch. So again, it's a good resource. And there are lots of, again, other ways you can use the NCES data. The rest of the information here from the US Department of Labor and different job sites are to assess the other side of it. So once your students graduate from their program, will they be able to get jobs? And what do the jobs look like? And what does the job future look like? So the top one there, the Occupational Outlook Handbook, gives you a 10-year perspective of what the jobs for these particular people will be like. The Projection Central, Career One Stop, and Employment Database, again, provide other types of data available for, again, assessing what the market will be for people who have the skill set and the credentials that you would offer through your curriculum. And that's the other side of this too, is you can look at this and say, okay, what are employers looking for in terms of skill sets for these particular people? And again, it might help you design your curriculum a little bit better that way too. So again, there are only really 2 or 3 different resources here: the U.S. Department of Education, the U.S. Department of Labor, and then again for-profit sites. But again, I think you can get an awful lot of information to assess your programs in this from using these resources.
Perfect. And this is an example, just a quick screenshot of the IPEDS database provided by NCES through the Department of Education. We at Capture use this quite a bit ourselves. In fact, a lot of this data that's publicly available become important public data sets that we bring into even some of our enrollment modeling at both the applicant and yield levels. So I just want to mention that, and look for the follow-up document that will come out to all of you with Lloyd's example. Lloyd, there's an approval process that most institutions have. So it's some type of institutional governance committee that kind of blesses the new program. Can you share a little bit of some do's and don'ts maybe in securing buy-in and approval from the campus community?
Yeah, I mean, I think primarily get as many people involved as you can. And you and I work together on the DOG group. We have something now called APFC, which is the Academic Program Facilitation Committee. And both of those groups involved a lot of people. So they would include people like John Witherington from admissions, but it would also include people from the registrar's office, from financial aid, from IT, from the library. And very early in the process. So at Jefferson, what we do is we make a presentation to the deans and across all the different colleges to see if there are any ways we can share some resources. And again, sometimes it's do you really need to have a course in I don't know, engineering statistics? We already have a statistics course. Can you use that one? Or we have some faculty over on this side that do analytics. If you're going to have some sort of analytics component in your program, maybe we can share the faculty there. But right after that, I'd say within weeks, we have this group of individuals come together from across campus to make sure that we don't get into trouble. And by that, I mean, we've had, I could give it a good admissions example that you know about, Jack, is, oh, by the way, we're launching a new program in the fall, and we tell you in June. How are you going to promote that? It's unfortunate, but the budget has already been made, and I'm sorry, I don't have any money for that.
Oh,
So it's aimed at preventing problems like that. Or we've had examples. I can give you one that I had recently too, is where we wanted to have a program, and I wanted to state a specific price for it. And I went to the financial aid office, and she said, well, you don't really want to do that, because if you do realize that federal aid is based upon the stated price or the stated tuition. So if you have a lower price, they're going to be able to access less aid. So, I didn't know that. But again, bringing together people that will have some impact on your program is critical as early as possible. And if you wait until 6 months before you launch the program, you're going to discover problems. And we try to avoid that with this group of individuals from across campus. And I think that's the most important thing we do.
Yes, well, I'm glad they picked a new acronym, because the DOG group, for folks out there, it had nothing to do with tails wagging. It was a Demand Assessment Working Group, DOG. So that was the background of that. Lloyd, thank you. You took us through the first kind of 5 key steps here for program development. And if there's anyone out there who has questions for Lloyd that we're going to take at the end, feel free to go ahead and put them in the Q&A chat feature. All right, so Jamie, we're at a point here where we've got to the point where the governance has happened, right? Approval's been bestowed on the program. The curriculum has been drafted. Folks have communicated, and it is now time to do some promotion and recruitment planning. So I'm going to turn things over to you here to talk about that. Jamie, are you on mute?
Yes, I was. Yeah, I had a great conversation myself here in the office. It wouldn't be a good webinar without one mute experience, I think.
Yes,
I think
indeed.
in the actual countdown, we're probably at the 1 and just before liftoff. So John and I are going to talk a little bit about promotion and recruitment. So John, thank you for joining us today. And it's just for those of you who are in the ether listening in, John and I have been working together at Jefferson as I'm their enrollment advisor. And he and I also worked together in his previous experience. But John, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background in higher ed and why that makes you a perfect person to talk to at this point in the process?
Yeah, well, thanks, Jamie. This is fun for me. This is kind of like old home week because I know all of you guys and have even served on that dog committee with Lloyd and Jack long ago, and so the fact that we get to come together and swap some of the tidbits of what we learned along the way is fun. Personally, I've had a pretty interesting journey over the years. I've been fortunate to have worked at some very different types of institutions in different capacities. In a previous life, I worked in adult education, primarily for accelerated degree completion programs in New Jersey. I've been the executive director of graduate education at a small private institution up in North Jersey. And over the last 15 years or so, I've been here in East Falls at Jefferson, Philadelphia University, and then Jefferson in enrollment management with some different hats. I've been, I've seen things from the undergraduate division solely. I was the director of the graduate division, and then more recently, when in 2017, I became the director of admissions that oversees undergraduate and graduate programs here at Jefferson. So, I bring that up not only because it's my background, but because I kind of have a unique perspective of seeing needs and seeing launches at places of different sizes and shapes over the years. And in preparation for this meeting, I did start counting, yes, Lloyd, how many he's been a part of. And I started counting just over the last 4 or 5 years of programs that we launched or redesigned, and I stopped counting at 28. So, they keep coming, right?
Yeah. It must say something about your ability to pull those through, John. So,
well, we're not talking, and we're not talking about the ones that didn't go.
No. These are all successes, I'm sure. That's why, absolutely. My assumption was all 100% success rate. So Lloyd just mentioned a little bit ago about the importance of campus buy-in and kind of what is that at that point that others should kind of be talking into the beyond governance and things like that. So ideally, from your perspective, when should someone in your current role as the director of admissions over grad and undergrad, what's that ideal time to be involved in this development process in a new program?
I mean, seriously, the answer is kind of like yesterday, right? I think it really is, though, pretty important for folks in enrollment management to get involved really early on and weigh in somewhat on viability and marketability of new programs. Because, while folks like Lloyd and consultants and data analysts and industry experts can spearhead conversations about assessing demand, there's admissions folks who are on the front lines and I think do hear the word on the street, and they bring a unique perspective about how a program might or might not fit into a larger portfolio of offerings. So I think it's good to get their perspective. more importantly, though, it's crucial that once a program is agreed upon by, whatever process an institution has, Lloyd mentioned the specific committees that formally stamp an approved program here at Thomas Jefferson University. But, I think that's when it becomes real, when the enrollment team really needs to kind of kick it into high gear and just get it done and operationalize it. I mean, I do think there's a tendency sometimes when something gets passed by a committee and a program is approved for a specific term, for a lot of folks that were involved in the assessment of it and the building of the curriculum. I mean, it's their baby, and it's like, yeah, we got it approved, and everyone high fives and exhales. But then the enrollment team is like, whoa, wait a minute. We have to do this, and we have to tell the market about it, that it exists, and we have to make sure that the campus community is ready to actually onboard it. So that's when we really need to step up.
Yeah, no, that's funny that you mentioned that, because I feel like it's a punt, right? It's like, oh yeah, celebrations going on up in the hallways and the faculty, and then they punt the ball, and it's like, okay, go get them. And in some cases there is that, like hopefully more than 6 months, but in some cases 2 or 3 months, we launched this, let's go do it. So in that process, what are some of the key questions that you begin to ask yourself when you're developing that recruitment and your marketing plan and kind of looking at the scope and the timing? What are those questions you're asking yourself and asking your team?
Yeah, I mean, well, I think you nailed it with your comment about is it in 6 months, or is it in 2 months, or is it we already told people about it and we're starting to get interest. So for me, that first question is always when.
Yeah.
I think in a perfect world we'd have about 18 months to launch a strategy, but that's not always realistic. But I do think that's ideal. So when is this happening? When do you all think this is happening? A lot of the questions too are similar to what Jack and Lloyd were mentioning earlier, as folks are involved in the exploratory process. A lot of those same questions are sort of asked by enrollment management, but just slightly in a different way. Like, we need the answers in order to understand and operationalize it. So, what is it? A lot of times there's a good amount of nuance to a program, or just straight product knowledge associated with the new program that has to get communicated to a marketing team to create collateral materials, or to a counseling team so that they can go on the road and talk about it. We need to know what it is, and we need to learn about it. What's the direct return on investment of completing the program? I think asking those questions, why would a customer care, will help you, because that helps inform us where they live. Where are those people? Who cares about this? Why would someone in industry need that credential? I think those answers really frame where and how the program gets promoted. And if there are logical industry partners that support it, is it fulfilling a need or an unmet need in their industry? Will they help us spread the word about it? I think is the question of, is there pent up demand? In many cases, I think the reason we create programs, right, is because we've been hearing so much about a need, and there's like a little bit of a line at the door because people have heard through the grapevine that this program is coming. So yeah, it's great that we have that first class come in and there's some pent up demand. That's great and takes the pressure off the first year. But is that pent up demand always going to be there? Or do we have to engage an entirely new population of prospective students all the time? We always want to know, would alumni care about this program? Can we go out to people we previously engaged with at times when we didn't have this program and now tell them we have it? Can we sort of remarket to them or retarget to them now that we have something new to say? And then, of course, there's always questions like, what's the target enrollment? What would deem this to be a success? What are we budgeted for to make this financially viable? Or on the flip side, are there caps to the amount of students that we can take? Do we run into space issues? Gosh, Jamie, there's so many questions, right? And I know as an enrollment guy, but what materials are we gonna need from applicants? What does that admissions criteria look like, and what types of things are we going to need to see from an applicant to determine candidacy? Do they need essays? Do they need to take an exam? Do we just need to meet them, every candidate, in person and hand select them or interview them? Detaily things like how much does it cost?
Right.
Can it,
It's almost like it seems like there's two sets of questions, right? There's kind of like the market-facing questions of demand, and then there's the internal process questions that you're kind of asking about, like, what's it going to do to us, and where is the kind of break-even point on the institutional side? So you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
I think those questions are, I think, critical questions, and it probably, if I'm thinking back experientially, there's probably a point too where those questions get asked over time, and maybe even different iterations of the question develop as you go through maybe cycle one, or even through the first kind of mental exercises of what that process looks like.
Mm-hmm. No, I think it's funny, Jamie, as we're talking about it too. This is, I find myself getting nervous. I'm like, oh my God, Jamie, I have so many questions. This is an imaginary program that hasn't happened yet, and I have so many questions about it. It's so fascinating.
So true. I'm anxious right now. I need a thumb.
Yeah, I know, all of a sudden.
So, John, is there like a standard strategy that you've employed when launching a new program, or do you think in your mind, is there like one kind of like cookie cutter, way to do it, or is everything kind of unique or have its own specific strategy?
Well, yeah, that's a great question. I think there's got to be a standard strategy to just straight up operationalize it. There really has to be an agreed upon checklist for need to know, people that are identified as need to know individuals to get something up and running, to have must have information that they need to to really make this thing go. And there needs to be a clear understanding who's driving the conversations to provide that information. At what point is it approved? Okay, who across the institution needs to incorporate it into their daily workflow? And we're talking about some of the same people that were mentioned earlier, like people from financial aid, people from student accounts, people from the registrar's office. It's very obvious to say out loud, but like, what's the title of the program? That has to be added to all applications and requests for information. And letters need to get changed with that program name and code and also detail-y things. People need to know how to bill students accurately. So I think that checklist is important, because it'll just assure that the bones are in place to make it so.
Sure.
But then, once you're comfortable that all those I's are dotted and T's are crossed, then I think you can have the really fun conversations about strategies and unique things that you can do to promote a particular program, and then you can get into really specific strategies related to messaging and events and marketing. But that it's going to onboard smoothly because you've informed the people who need to know.
Sure. Yeah, man, it's so funny how the emotions, like, of this even this conversation, I feel like it's very emotional because it's like bringing up all these like previous experiences in my mind. So John,
yeah, and it's exciting too. You know, it's it's always high intensity because it's you wouldn't do it if you didn't care. You're birthing things out of what didn't exist before, and then now there's a lot of people's hopes riding on the success of it. So you want to make it happen.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. There's a poll that just showed up on everyone's screen. Jack, do you want me to talk about this, or are you going to talk about this?
Folks can go ahead and take that poll. We'll be talking about an assessment in just a few minutes' time. And once we talk about that, you can answer that question as to whether or not that would be something that you would be interested in pursuing.
All right. Great. Thanks, Jack. John, a couple more questions that we've been thinking about here. So as you are thinking about the launching of a new program, what are the key tactics that you're going to recommend everyone just kind of think through? Key tactics.
Yeah, I mean, so the checklist that we talked about is one form of a tactic, right? That ensures that people in the campus community know how to deploy a program. I think a key tactic is not to forget that you really need to spend a significant amount of time with the folks who created the program and go through sort of a similar checklist to make sure that you understand how best to leverage all of their connections and area and expertise really in order to promote it. So sit down with the faculty, sit down with the industry experts, sit down with the folks who did the study, because they still need to be included at this point and might not always see the value that they bring to the table in order to market and promote the program. So I think that's something that is important to continue to do. I also think it's clearly important to have a very thoughtful and balanced promotional plan of attack with a nice mix of strategies, whether that's a combination of direct mail and social media and email marketing and of course a really strong website and the ability to track those efforts that are being deployed to see what's working and what's not. And that's where you guys or folks from Capture can come in and assist and provide some guidance.
Sure, absolutely. Okay, so along with the key tactics, the other, the flip side of that coin is common pitfalls. So just a couple minutes here to talk about things that in your mind are things to avoid.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about things to avoid, it's just communication in a lot of cases. So I guess, well, if you make it a pitfall, I guess the pitfall will be not communicating.
Yeah.
But I'd rather err on the side of inviting more people to a meeting to discuss all the details of a program and have somebody say that, I really don't think I need to be here right now, as opposed to someone coming back later and saying, hey, whoa, why didn't I know about this? So, I think that's one, and also I think it's important for everybody involved you want to find the right balance of not missing an opportunity to strike while the iron is hot. If there's a good idea, we want to jump on the opportunity and not wait too long, wringing our hands until it's a perfect time to launch, but also not jumping in so quickly that you let some of the really important details slide. Because I think the worst case scenario is that you just kind of launch halfway and you go in too soon, and then the customer experience is underwhelming or poor, because you'll never get a chance to recover those students and make a good impression if their first impression was a bad one. So
yeah, that sounds like wisdom coming through, John. Wisdom from experience.
How about it? I became.
Well, I appreciate that insight. This has been certainly helpful, I think, for us to even think through it, and hopefully for those on on the webinar also to kind of hear that insight from two seasoned professionals who have been through this rodeo a few times. Jack, I think I'm going to hand it back over to you.
Yeah, Jamie, thank you. John, thanks. Like Lloyd is, I'm hoping you'll stick around for some questions, because it looks like we do have some questions that'll be coming in. Jamie, John started to get to a lot of this in his kind of final answer there. We went through the stages here, and it's now time to actually launch. So everyone in the audience, Jamie and I are just going to run through just kind of what based on our experience in helping folks launch new programs, what we really stress that you focus on. All of you, I think particularly in the graduate space, but I believe we're starting to feel this a little bit at the undergraduate space as well, are aware of some of the issues in dwindling response from more traditional search efforts. So what we do at Capture and recommend is a comprehensive digital strategy that is data informed, that is both external digital, but also internal digital. In other words, digital advertising across social media, across the internet, across devices, but also not ignoring your own .edu. So more on that in a moment. So kind of in short, this is a digital strategy, a comprehensive digital strategy for your new programs that is informed by behavioral intelligence. The key components of this are certainly to build program awareness, basically to do so in a way that drives folks to your website, that conveys real value once they get there and is able to generate and capture interest. That then allows your counseling team to build that relationship and then ultimately bring that digital back in the form of retargeting and other strategies to remain front of mind. Jamie, I am a little bit concerned about time. So kind of rather than going through every single one of these, we're gonna spread this, pass this slide deck over to folks. Here is an example of some work that we did for both Drew. I'm going to kind of just fast forward here and get us pretty much to the end. Give you some quick, let me just get us, here is also, Lloyd was mentioning digital health, so I do want to give Jefferson a bit of a throw out. Here's an example of some retargeting campaigns that we're doing for Jefferson. But we'll make sure that we pass this along. This goes through examples and strategy points for every single one of these stages. Last, I will say, we at Capture do not believe that that one solution fits all. So while we do have best practices in terms of program launch and what some of those key strategies should be for marketing, promotion, and recruitment, I want you to know that we take the responsibility very seriously of having a meaningful conversation and that is really focused on solving your specific pain points, because they will be different institution to institution. So if you're interested in kind of having Capture kick the tires a little bit on your new program launch strategy, by all means, respond yes to the poll question that comes up asking you if you would like to have that conversation. And if it is a new graduate program, you'll be chatting with me. And if it is a new undergraduate program, you'll be chatting with Jamie. All right. Jamie, anything to add before we get to questions?
I don't think so, Jack. I want to make sure that we're aware of everyone's time and that we get to questions. I mean, I want to say a big thank you, if I don't get a chance to Lloyd and to John for their insight. I think it's been critical and just really good to hear what the feedback they gave. So go for it with the questions.
Yeah, I do have a question that was that came through here. Lloyd, I think this one is for you. It has to do with kind of program development and the level of the program. Based on what you've seen and what you've done and what you've launched, do you feel that there is a preference toward launching new graduate programs, new undergraduate programs, or new credential programs?
Well, what I've seen lately and seen from other institutions too is there's a preference for graduate programs, and I think it's primarily based on return on investment. Most graduate programs have either little or no discount rate, so folks tend to focus on that. Undergraduate programs are a little bit trickier, and there are some with very high discount rates. I was just reading today that Nakubo just came out and said that the average discount rate across the United States for undergraduate programs has surpassed 50% now. But I like to caution people and say it's always nice from an investment perspective to have a nice portfolio. And we're looking at right now declining enrollment in undergraduate programs. It's again another reason why people are focusing on graduate. But my experience is if we're talking about typical graduate age students, they're a little bit older. They tend to, again, focus more on part-time programs, and they're not very interested in having a new credential right now. They've got good jobs, they're getting paid well, unemployment's low. So again, I think there's a little bit of pressure on graduate programs that we will be experiencing for a little while now at least. What I'm trying to recommend to people is consider having the 4+1, 3+2, whatever you want to call them, programs where you target your current undergraduate students to go right into the graduate programs. You've got customers who are already satisfied with the product. They know you. So marketing to existing undergraduate students for graduate programs is one thing that I highly encourage. And as you showed on your one slide there for the Jefferson Digital Health, if we don't know what the demand for something is going to be, we use a credential or a stackable credential to test the market. So again, if you're not real sure of the market, you might want to try a certificate.
Perfect. All right. Thank you for that. Jamie, this is a question I'm going to go ahead and pose to you that came through, though I'm happy to take it too because I think it came up during one of the things I was speaking with Lloyd about, or actually in the very beginning. But anyway, the question is has to do with search. If you are launching a new program and that has not been a part of your search buy, what types of things can you do to bring in new folks to your funnel?
Sure. Yeah.
I guess you understand the gist of that question?
Yeah, absolutely. I've interacted with a number of partners, even in the last 18 months, where they've gone through expansions of programs and added new things to their portfolio. I think, in my mind, I know that you said the statistic about search and how search is certainly something that we see kind of. There's some question marks on the horizon, but my perspective professionally is that if it's available, there's probably no cheaper and easier way to build a prospective audience than to go out and buy those pre-qualified leads who've already, said, hey, I've got interest in this. They meet the same geographic, criteria that you've had or have placed in the past. Academically, you can filter that way. I think that as long as those programs are there, or programs that potentially could feed into things like that. So that I know that there's often some question of like, are there, one-to-one relationships in ACT and College Board for this program or that? But you can often find like complementary programs that could feed into it. So my feeling is as long as they're there, take advantage of them while you can and bring those into your pipeline and start the deployment of your resources, pushing your new program, and test the market, test those leads in particular that way, and maybe do kind of some A/B testing against potential organic leads or some paid social prospecting if you're doing, social search or things like that where you're reaching out to a brand new profile audience.
Yeah, I was seeing some data the other day. It was talking about just a number of institutions that are becoming search optional or test optional, and then at the graduate level, that is pretty predominant. In terms of just so many institutions waiving the standardized test score, the GRE, the GMAT, et cetera. So doing a lot of that paid social prospecting and other kind of digital lead capture is important. At the undergrad level, I think you're exactly right. There are so many CIP codes, the SIP codes, that where there's overlap in terms of kind of discipline area. So you probably have a lot more folks actually in your search by that may be interested in that new program offering than you even realize. So just 2 cents on that. All right, well, that brings us to 2 o'clock. That brings us to the end. For folks who asked questions and we didn't get time to respond, we will respond to you by email. All those who, it looks like we had a good number of folks here that are indeed interested in having a program assessment, so we will reach out and get those scheduled. For those of you that are mulling that over, I am sure Alicia will send you a wonderful email that thanks you for your attendance, and that will include a link to a page where if you want to sign up for a conversation, we certainly can do that. Lloyd, John, thank you so much for taking the time to meet with us today. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
You got it. To our audience, on behalf of my good friend Alicia and my good friend Jamie at Capture, I want to thank you so much for joining us today.